What's going on out there this fine Tuesday evening in MECA land? How we doing out there, MECA heads? What we got going on out there this week? Anything going on out there interesting this week in MECA land? YouTube, Facebook, we should be live. So I'm gonna have Mr. Joe on here in just a minute. We'll cut it up, answer questions, talk about stuffs. What's going on, Mr. Duke, Mr. Kramer? Testing 1 2 3 1 2 3. Well, again, I don't have a whole lot of new news. The website should be going under construction here in the next week or so. They're going to be working on it during Christmas break, so hopefully we'll have some progress before the first of the year here, getting that stuff straightened out. Um, we got our 4X for Florida coming up February 1 and 2 at the Farmhouse Bar and Grill there in Crescent City. And they're going to have a toy drive show there this weekend on the 15th, Crescent City, Florida at the Farmhouse Bar and Grill. Creative Disturbance there is putting on a toy drive at the Farmhouse Bar and Grill this weekend in Crescent City, Florida. What's going on, Mr. Beard? And I think that's pretty much all my news right this second. So I've already got Mr. Joe in here, I believe. So I'm going to click him on. And let's see here. I got Mr. Joe, the Ghost of Christmas Futures. What's going on, man?
I don't have that fancy green screen like you have, so doing something funky to the background.
No, it's all good. I just had to make a joke. Yep, we are going to offer a training there, Matt. I think that'll be the 31st of January there in Florida. So we'll have a training there kicked off before the 4X. No, that's probably not gonna. That'll probably be a long ways off, David, because everything draws off your name and your number. So that makes things a lot more difficult to do. What's going on, Mr. Hemp, Mr. Gamble, Mr. Haslage? How we doing this evening? So I got Mr. Joseph Ault Sr. on here, 2024 Street 3 champion. I think he's been champion several times. Yeah, unfortunately, David, it's just something that, as complicated as we have the system and how we want it to work, a lot of those things is going to take some time. So I'm not real 100% sure, but I know with the last guy we were working with, that was something that he basically said it would take a while before we could make that happen because of how it's basically 3 or 4 different systems that are pulling information from each other. So you have to try to keep them consistent because computers work off of whatever you tell them. So at least that's the way I understood what I was explained. So yeah, Wayne and Matt will be there. Tony, we'll have our other guys, but right now I got on here Joe. Anybody got questions with Joe? Questions for Joe? Otherwise, I'll start grilling him and then we'll see what happens, I guess. All right, it doesn't look like I'm really getting a lot of questions, so I guess we'll just start off with, like I said, Joe was 2024 champion, but been around a long time. The longest standing members still. So it's his shirt and hat keeps disappearing. Yeah, what's going on, Mr. Mayo? So I guess you want to tell them a little bit about yourself, Joe, and then if they don't start asking you stuff, I will.
All right.
I don't know which one's better though.
No, I, let's see. What did he say? Oh, yeah. It's Hash was asked about when it was my first finals was in 2004. That was my rookie year, and I won Street 3. That's when we were metering in the kick, and we were using amp ratings, so it's pretty far removed from there. And then '05 is I think when we switched to the fuses. After that, in '05, I think I won Street 1. We had Mike Quattro, where they put 4 meters in. That's what we had that. We had Reality, and then Park and Pound was a little different then. We actually did a drive-by thing to the mic, so that was a little different then. And they had construction cones as trophies. It seems like forever ago. That was 20 years ago. And then went through and won all the street classes after that. I don't remember the exact orders, but I think it was Street 1 a couple times, and then I moved on to 4 and 5, I think, after that.
4 and 5.
Yeah, so then I won Street 3, 20 years apart from each other. And then intentionally I won with the same score. I thought that was something that was cool for 20 years apart. Once I knew it was going to be a winning score, I did that in the lane instead.
That's cool. Looks like Wayne says that's a pretty broad question. He says, "What's your secret to success?"
Test.
Test, yeah, that's really it. Test and pay attention what the meter tells you. I've never. People always build a box and they say, "What do I go by this port area formula?" Or I tune my box to this and I do all these things. I've never ever gone by that kind of formula or done that. What I do is I build a box that I feel like is too big, and start off with whatever, a port area or something like that, just some sort of baseline, and take a whole bunch of notes from that, and see what I know, working out what I think that the vehicle wants, and let the meter just kind of tell me what to dictate that. So taking space out of the box or changing the port like that, those kind of things. Usually, first box I build is really just the box I've screwed together, and the back of it is just screwed on. I don't glue it. That way I can change that rear panel and make a bunch of different ports, do whatever I want. Really, really it's a lot of documentation, and then watching what I do. I've always tried to take good notes and then refer back to those and see exactly what I think has been successful, or where something has gone awry. Like sometimes you just lose your score and you don't know where that is. So at least you can go back to finding your baseline and go back to there. And that's the big thing is keeping good notes, I think, and having a baseline. Every time you start the day, before you make any changes, you get a baseline and see where you are for that day, see where the score is. Start from there. Just be consistent, and then when you're testing, you only change one thing at a time and see what's actually works. I see people show up at shows all the time with a different box every show, and you're like, they're not working out what they have, and they can't get any kind of consistency, and they can't get any kind of real results. It's I think you kind of got to beat something to death before you just move on from it. That's kind of always been my idea.
I think that's a pretty good answer. Hey, it's Joe. What's going on, Mr. Cody, Mr. Gorin? How we doing this fine evening? I got Mr. Joe on here answering questions. I've been bringing on some of the champions, club members, things like that. If anybody wants to come on here and chat with us, get with me, and we'll get you on here one week, trying to shake it up a little bit, make things a little more interesting. Um, Joe's been around this sound pressure stuff for a pretty long time, so any of you guys that have questions about things, he doesn't bite too hard, and usually he could get you some pretty good advice if you pay attention. So those are, I guess that then you can keep the questions coming. What's going on, Mr. Slayball? And I guess we're gonna have a debate. I think it might be our first good question.
I think that's. I think that.
I think the meter tells you the answer to that, but
Correct. It just really depends on, obviously, for what class you're wanting to work towards. If you if you have a low power class, obviously you could have too much cone area, and it will, it'll look, it's kind of deceiving. So say if you have like 415s and you're only running 2,000 watts, it's not going to work out for you very well. You're going to have issues, cone area, since we take away cone area. Now, if we only went by straight power, it might be something different. But taking away, cone area from your overall power rating, that definitely could hurt you. And you could have too much cone area, and that will make a huge difference. And your low power scores won't be nearly as good as if you just went with a single sub or something like that. That's why you see a lot of people in like the lower power classes, they'll only use one sub. They don't use multiple subs. They'll use a single 15 or an 18 or something like that. And I mean, Selena had great success running a single sub, for a long time, all the way up until I think she went to Street 5 is when she finally changed, right? Maybe at the end of her Street 4 run, I think she started with it, but all the way,
we started testing 2 in Street 4, but we never, she never used 2 until Street 5. But I mean, she kind of got lucky the last couple of years, didn't really need it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she was right around like a 56.8 or a 56.9 with a single 15 on Street 4 power back then.
Yeah.
So the 2 speaker score was quite a bit better, obviously, but I don't know. We messed with 1 that long, and we really just kind of took pride in trying to see how loud we could make the 1 speaker until we absolutely needed to be able to take the power. But I mean, cone area versus power, what's better for sound pressure? I mean, I think that could be organization dependent, because kind of like Joe said, we calculate cone area off of your power rating, or I mean, really, it's not even really a power rating in MECA to be technical. It's a pressure class rating. So it's your pressure class rating number is what that number is. It's not. There it is.
Oh, I was gonna say, blood froze up on us.
Well, it looked like my internet went down for a second. My connection just dropped off my computer even, but it's back now. I don't know what that was all about. But anyways, we were talking cone area versus power, and I was kind of explaining, how we take the cone area off of the pressure rating, or, I know a lot of people still call it the power rating or the power cap, but essentially, the rule book states it as the pressure class rating system. So what you've got there is your pressure rating or your pressure number, and then you take the cone area off of that. And I think you just gotta do some testing and figure that out. For me, I feel like if you're running, a 1 class, you're probably better off with a single 15 or a single 18, maybe a couple 12s. But I like single speakers. If you're less than 3,000 watts, I like a single speaker, because especially that was part of the reason why we started with one speaker with Selena. I made her do a lot of the stuff and redo everything that I did. And when you're working one speaker, there's a lot less variables to deal with as far as cancellation and things of that nature. The more speakers you add, the more you're dealing with. So until you have to have it, you can generally squeeze a little more efficiency out of the one woofer at the lower power levels, until you figure some things out. Um, that's another thing about sound pressure. I don't really think anything's a law. Uh, what works for you is what you should do. And I'm kind of like Joe. We use the meter to tell us, but I would feel like, in other scenarios where you're not taking the cone area off of your power, I'll agree with cone area would be king at that point to an extent, because you can put too many. So that's another test you can run. I mean, we've ran tests all the way from one speaker to 10 speakers. And, once you find a certain point, there's a such thing as too many. So, especially if you're dealing with a no wall vehicle, wall cars get a little bit different, I think. But that's my take on the cone area thing.
I agree with what Cody was saying. He was saying when it starts getting more efficient, definitely for me, like when I start the last 100 watts for me, or like as that's working in there, you definitely way more important than if I tried adding another sub or tried doing that. And it definitely, might gain you a tenth or so, but that 100 watts can make a huge difference you know, in what you actually see for score compared to overall. I definitely would trade that off once, like you said, once you start getting a little more efficient. I would definitely trade off the 100 square inches of cone versus the 100 watts. That's for sure. Like Philip was saying something about being a lot of 412s or 218s. I believe the 18s that you have will be better than the 412s. With the 18s that I've seen that you posted, if you're using two of the iPal 18s, I think you'd be better off with two iPal 18s over the 412s, in my opinion, just from my testing. Uh, you know, I'm sure there's other subs and other things out there and what those 12s could be or those kind of things. But if you're looking to stay in Mod Street 2, I think I think the two iPals would be a better way to go.
Yeah, Mike, I lost connection, so we did switch sides. Let's see. Rules will be out hopefully by the first week of January. I'm pretty close on the sound pressure book. I'm working on dueling demos, and we're talking about sound quality right now. So I think we're moving along pretty decent. So I'd say, hopefully the first week of January, you'll have probably at least sound pressure and dueling demos, and hopefully sound quality and show and shine can follow shortly after that, or if not all at the same time. It just depends on how much discussion we end up having over the next week or so. Uh, is this the comment you were replying to a second ago, that when it starts to get really efficient, 100 watts means a lot more than 100 from cone? Uh, that's arguable too, in my opinion, but yes and no. It
Well,
depends. To me, it depends on where you're at in the threshold as far as reeling the next one in. And I don't know if that makes a sense to a lot of people, but I look at efficiency maybe differently. So, I'll look at what the car can do, and then I'll bring the score to me. And I think it ends up depending on where you're at in that building stage of getting the power there, because a lot of times right before you break down another wall, you'll find a spot where you can do a great score inside your power cap, but you'll have 300 to 500 watts that won't do squat. And then that's when you're usually getting close to bringing the next score in. But I don't know, that's just kind of something I see. So I think it depends on kind of where you're at in that build. Let's see.
Sorry, my dogs were getting ready to tussle or something there. I don't know.
What's going on, Mr. Nilo? I mean, this is something that we've been talking about for almost 3 years, Cody. So, I mean, really, Joe and I have spoke about it, and I think that we've got something at this point that we might be able to start taking off with. But obviously, we still have to look at things and work through it. But I'm definitely interested in making the meter placement more consistent across the board. So, that's my 2 cents on that. Let's see.
I think you're right, Cody. For last 300 watts doesn't do anything. You're in the wrong. You're definitely, but that would, if you did that, then you know that last 300 watts, if it doesn't do anything, then you know that something, that your box is wrong, like either, or your cone area is incorrect. Because if if it doesn't stay linear all the way up to your power, and you still aren't gaining past that, then you know that there's something wrong. You aren't built for that band of power that you're in. So if that's happening, then you need to make some sort of adjustment to make that power work up until the last watt works. Because then then obviously you've left something there, and you probably have a big low power score. If that's true, your low power score is probably really good, and that will probably end up suffering. Once you fix that and you fix that problem that you still aren't gaining for, then your low power score will probably suffer a bit, but your high end score that you're building for that power will probably gain. That's just what I've seen, in my testing.
I'm trying to catch up here.
And Ben's correct. Just like what I was saying, is being linear as possible across that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of that. I just think I see things differently sometimes, but I'm weird. Because I also I don't believe there's a limit to it. So yeah, you're looking for the linearity, but you're also looking for when it disappears, and then I'm looking to bring it back. I'm not trying to get too far off topic or too out of the way for people that are really just trying to do better, but I'm talking about the points where you get stuck and most people will quit, or most people will say, oh, I'm in the wrong class, and move a class. And I'm talking about making it do what I want. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think I was saying that the same kind of way, was that's exactly what you want, is that, well, I want to stay in this class, so I need to adjust my setup so that it actually, I'm maximizing what I need for my power, and I'm maximizing what I'm doing for that class, and I'm building for the class. Because you've made some sort of change that's made it so that isn't your class anymore. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that yeah. I was just saying that if you stick to some of those thoughts too hard, you're going to cost yourself from going over the brick wall.
Yep.
That's all I was really trying to say. I'm not saying those aren't the right thought processes. I'm just saying don't let those things box you into a box.
Correct. And you are right. There is, and I know Cody ran into this too. There is a point to where so it doesn't make sense where you kind of defy like the laws of physics, and you have like this threshold that where you're gaining. So say it takes you 400 watts to gain a tenth. Well, for whatever reason, there's this threshold that some vehicles have, and it's like then where you get to this threshold and it's gaining by 200 watts, a tenth or something like that. There's a threshold to where it just kind of where you have like this sudden kind of jump of the vehicle. I feel like I don't know, I've just come across to where there's a point to where it seems like it's like there's a threshold of the vehicle where you just gain more than what you normally do with the same amount of power, and that seems to change, with what you are, with what you're trying to accomplish, by the building for that class.
I think it's just trying to understand what it's telling you. It's usually something to do with the speaker in the box or a mismatch between that. And then eventually you'll just get stuck.
Then you're fighting for tenths and finding score in the vehicle because, I've seen people gain a good amount by just setting up the car correctly and looking at those kind of things, and just you can do a lot of things to just set your car correctly to where it's gain score, and you're doing that the same way every time. That's part of that testing, is finding a lot of score in the car. You could build as many boxes as you want and change subs and do this and change your port area, box location, do all these sort of things. But then when you start looking for more score in the vehicle, you start finding things that way with prep and with your seat position. Make sure that things are correct. The seat position that the mic isn't in is also like your glove box, your vents. There's so many different things that could change in your vehicle that could cost you a lot of score just for people sitting in the car or how they're sitting in the car. It's a lot of those things that you can gain a lot of score just working on that. Just finding score in the car is a lot of times not. I don't make a lot of changes. Like I'll start with a box and use that box for a long time. Just keep on, working that out for a very long time. But finding score in the car is key to me.
That's always been one of my keys, I think, is there's the score comes a lot out of figuring how to set the car up, which is basically your enclosure if you really want to get down to it. I think that goes a long way. I don't know if you still do it or not, but I know, the first 3 or 4 years, and you talked about taking notes and, how important that was. And, you're constantly trying new stuff, building something different, try this, try that, etc. But, we always had a list that might be, it might be 10 or 15 or 20 things. But, we always had a checklist when we were going to a show, and we know these 15 things do this. And, I would tape it to the radio or, whatever. And then, when we'd get ready to go, did you go over the list? Yep. Then, it's good. That it's hard to remember some of those things, especially if you're trying as much different stuff as as you try usually. So knowing what works and keeping track of that is important, I think.
Sometimes testing also is just practice, and that's sometimes you never, like, say if you do a whole testing session and you don't find any score, or something happens during the testing session and you find out that's costed you that much score, and you see that when you're testing. So sometimes with just testing, you can kind of weed out some of the gremlins in your system. You can also find out what's like what could go wrong, and be able to fix that, or this is what my vehicle does on this particular day, or temperature, humidity, those kind of things. Anything that's a control that you kind of pay attention to. So I don't know if people like feel like if they have a testing session and they don't gain any score, it's still successful because you still practiced And I think that's kind of, it kind of helps you, when it counts, when you're in the lane and you're getting metered and you're getting tested, that way you're successful. Yeah, I've been there, Wayne. We've all been there, but that's when you got to make a drastic change. Like if you're beating it, if you're beating your head against the wall for a while, and that's when you make your change. That's when I was saying that you beat that to death, and you need to make a drastic change. That means you need to try a different box. You need to try different. You need to just make an overall change. But you have all your data that you still have, and you could go back to that other setup. But you need to make a drastic change to know, like, what's, what do you think is stopping you? What's that brick wall?
I agree with that. And it does get frustrating when that happens, but we all get there, and it happens to every one of us, I think. You just got to keep on grinding. And, I know Joe was speaking on testing, and sometimes, I think it's important to understand that you're not always going to find success. So don't look at everything as a loss, because, you might learn something during the session for sure. And especially with the clamp power classes, it's always good to get out there and, if you're running a clamp class, to get that practice in, making sure, you can hit your power and all that good stuff and dial that part of it in. But I also see a lot of times guys will get trapped in that mindset. I don't know, but they'll just kind of be burping the car to burp it, and they won't be trying anything. And if you're really not sitting there trying to practice your power limits and stuff or dial that in, I'm a firm believer of, like, you want to try to have a plan of what you're trying to accomplish, because if you're not learning, then, testing the car or burping the car just to burp it's not going to make it louder. You can't burp the car and make no changes and have the expectation that just because you went and burped your car, for an hour, that it should get louder. So you don't want to fall into that trap of not trying different things. You just have to know what works, and you have to try one thing at a time. And when the meter says no, you go back. And then when the meter says yes, you go to the next thing, and, vice versa.
I agree, Kevin. Definitely. I don't think I've ever walked away from a testing session. Even if you went, we say sometimes when we leave the testing session, I think we just went sideways today, but at least we didn't lose, and at least we learned that this doesn't work. I don't think that you ever, like, man, I just wasted my whole time, But
I'm catching up. I agree. I pretty much agree with what Kevin said, but every once in a while, when you're grinding on it real hard, every once in a while you'll get into a state of mind where you're not really doing anything different, and that's a trap. You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Wayne, you asked about testing on full power or low power. So what I do is I do watch what my 500 watt score is. I definitely take that 500 watt score and I practice. I check that all the time, and I see this is my 500 watt score. Then I look to do some changes with that 500 watt score and see what changes, and then I'll move it to. Depending on the class you go to. So like last year for me was, 4,000 was my class. So then I test my 500 watt score. I'd look at that and I'd say, oh, I made a change and a gain here. And then I'd go to 1,000 watt score, and I'd say, did it change here? All right, well, I gained from my 1,000 watt score. Then I would check that and work that out. If it didn't change it, then then it's just a low power gain, and that's it. Didn't really work, worried about it. But then I'd take that 1,000 watt score, and if it gained 1,000 watts, then I would test it on full power. But I'd make some changes, because then I'd keep watching that 1,000 score and going back and forth with that 500 watt score to see what changed. But I take that in steps, and I look to see where that is, to see if it gains. But then I also have, data. So then if I go to do a lower power class, in the future, then I have the data that I've already tested my 500 watt and 1000 watt. This is what worked there. I can go back to those things and see what kind of is gained for me there, and I have some more knowledge about my system for that. Plus, it's an easy thing to test at the show. If you want to say this is what my 500 watt score is, do a quick test. That way you know. Like at finals, when I got there on Sunday, first thing I did was got in, started testing. Oh, my 1000 watt score is down a good bunch. Why am I down? Well, it's a whole lot colder. My vehicle's colder, so I got in, warmed it up, got everything going, retested again, and the score was back and everything was fine. But right off the rip, if you aren't testing that and have that 1000 watt data, then you're like, oh man, I got to go back and find out like what happened, and you're panicking, or you don't know, or you make the mistake and you go up in the lane and you don't, too late by that point to find that you're down, 7/8. So that's definitely data that you want to have, so you can kind of make sure of what you have in the lane is what you had, during testing.
What's going on, Mr. Thibodeau? That was one of the things we already kind of covered. Was, I think Joe and I are both kind of old school. I use a notebook. I'm pretty sure Joe uses a notebook also. Some guys use computers, but you definitely want to be logging everything. And that way what to come back to and what to not come back to, I suppose. But I'm also one of those guys that I've tested so many radios. I'm embarrassed about it, really. But uh, I'm one of those guys that just because I already know it don't work, I might try it again later if I learn something else works in the future. Then I'll go back and retest a whole bunch of stuff that I think doesn't work. And sometimes you'll find that when you found out that, oh, this worked, now this other thing will come in and help also. It can get real complicated, but paying attention to the data is important, and knowing what is working for you is definitely a plus.
That is something too. Is things compound? You have compound gains. Like you have a compound of two different things, and you say, "Oh, this is, like this seat position gains for me this way, but this doesn't gain for me." Say like my back seat, like gains if it's set up this way, the behind the driver's seat that seat gains like this, but then doesn't gain if this person sits this way. It's like a compound kind of thing. But if this person is sitting this way, then the back seat doesn't gain for me. It's like those kind of things, like the compound gains that seem to be so this works, and this gains me every time I do this, but when I add this to it, it doesn't gain anymore. Like those kind of things. You have to watch out for those kind of things. You have to go back and retest that stuff and find out the combination of those changes and make sure those combinations all work together. Because it used to be back in the day, we would test, and we would say like, oh well, if you put towels underneath your seats, like that would be a gain for you, like in the kick, but it hurt you at the headrest. So you have to kind of look and see like how does this compound gain work.
That's an easy question, Wayne, but we can go over it. Score or rise or power factor more important to pay attention to? Always score. Rise and power factor will usually come hand in hand at some point when you're paying attention to efficiency. And most of the guys that do efficiency will probably agree with that to some extent. But I think he already kind of knows my 2 cents. I'm just retelling it because they asked me a little bit about it earlier. And power factor and rise is something that I definitely monitor, and I definitely log, and I definitely keep track of it. And when you start closing the gap between the three of those things, then you'll start to see things you didn't think you could see. Um, but those things are also telling you they're telling you a story, and I'm not necessarily 100% sure how to explain it, but I understand it in my way. And most people that knows me know that I'm weird, and my understanding might not necessarily be right, but I can make it work. Um, So, um, you know, in a nutshell, power factor is essentially the efficiency of your power, and then your rise is obviously what's coming, you know, as you're burping the car. And not always, but generally, if you see a higher rise, you'll start to gain efficiency, and it's not always true. But a lot of times those three things will hold hands in the long haul. But when you're in the beginning stages, and trying to figure the car out, and when if you're not at that point of like I feel stuck and I'm beating my head against a brick wall, I wouldn't put a whole lot of weight on the rise in the power factor. I never really put a whole lot of weight on it, but it's definitely something that if you get stuck or if the radio starts to not work the way it used to, if you have that information, it can tell you a story and give you an idea of what direction to look to make things better. But I wasn't necessarily talking about reaction to power factor. I was just, maybe that didn't make sense, but I was talking about like rise to efficiency more than power factor. But I mean, I've seen stupid power factors with 10 times rise. So I mean, I'm not 100% sure what the term lab's spitting out is 100% what all that stuff actually is. I'm just saying that, you know, we can argue about it all we want to, but I just have to show you.
That is something though, is like how the term lab actually sees it, because you see things. I don't know. I think this year when I'm testing, I think I'm going to do more of testing with different clamps and things like that to see, like a fluke clamp or something like that, to see how that actually shows. Because, man, I feel like sometimes, like, you're exactly right. Like the term lab just just spews out some crazy information when you're looking at that kind of stuff. When you're looking at power factor and looking at those kind of things, I feel like gives us some weird numbers that doesn't make sense.
I mean, it's not uncommon for me, and I'm sure a lot of the guys that are built for efficiency. I mean, you don't even necessarily have to be one of the loudest. And I mean, you'll start to see 0.9, 0.95, 0.99 power factors. And I think Ben will probably be the first one to agree that we probably shouldn't be seeing power factors that high with the subwoofer motor, but we do, at least according to what the term lab tells us. Because it's my understanding from what little bit of knowledge I do have that perfect would be one. So, there you go. Seven ohms rises life.
When you start off at 1.8 ohms,
But we get to talking about all this complicated stuff, and we probably could just have Ben on here because Ben's been, as far as like understanding, how it's actually supposed to be and supposed to work. Ben's probably one of the smartest guys that I know about that stuff. So, whatever he's saying, he definitely knows what he's talking about.
He's an
But
electrical engineer, so
yeah,
yeah, definitely that's his career.
but I mean, I think even I've showed him stuff that he's like, nope, and then he'll end up figuring it out one way or another. But you know, usually the simple guy I am, I just am like, well, it says this and this, and so that's what it did. But we'll see. I might get him on here again. 8 times rise is expensive. I hear that.
Yeah, it's hard to make power. That's the issue with some things, is making power.
That's who you guys want to see next week is Ben, huh? I might have to twist his arm. I don't know. I think he came on here one time with me along when I first started it, maybe.
Yeah, he was on there before. I don't think he said too much though. I think he was a little shy. That's kind of Ben. He's kind of a shy guy.
What's going on, G? We got any other questions? Wire for fire? If you have to run a 20K in S1,
Well, if you start off with 4 ohms, yeah.
I mean, I don't really know anybody that absolutely has to do that, but
Well,
I mean, I could see needing a good 3 to 5K. To make the 500 watts you need, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I know we've seen it. Mike have a hard time in his car. Make his power for kick, for his 4K, starting off at 2 ohm with a 20K amp. He has a hard time making that 3,500 watts, 3,800 watts sometimes, just because of reactive. So, like I said, 7 or 8 ohms, I think it is. There's a lot of amps that can make a good clean 4K. That's tough.
Keep the questions coming. Go ahead, roll them in. What format would you want to replace RTA and Bobos?
Yeah, I think doing demos is definitely the. I'd like more participation in doing demos also. So I think that will kind of push that. Maybe some of those people will start doing that a little more. The doing demos. Show and shine's not. It's not. I don't know that. I don't know that that's the right format for Bobos. I like Show and Shine, and of course I think it's a great format. But I also think that I think that doing demos fits that a little better, just because it's another audio, format rather than just the the car show stuff.
Right. Shannon wants to know what you think about dueling demos and the direction it's moving, and if you would plan to play in that format.
If I would, me personally,
Yeah.
I did last year. Me and the boy worked on his car. we worked a lot on the boy's car together to get it ready. I don't know, for me, I don't know that my vehicle is. I mean, I'd have to make some changes to make that work, but Whitney definitely wants to do some doing demos with there's I don't want to give away too much. There's some changes to doing demos that are coming, and I feel like that kind of class will be something that will fit her vehicle a lot better than the classes that are now.
Yeah. I think everybody should lose Bobo because their car's dirty.
Yeah, that's why I don't. That's why I don't think that Show and Shine fits it. Fits the format well with the best of the best. I just don't feel like that fits the sort of thing that like RTA would be losing another audio, since we're losing that as an audio format. I don't think we replace it with something that's a format like that. I'd like to see something with like doing demos. I think that's a format, like we said, something that we want to promote, keep on growing, and I think adding people in that are going to be doing Bobos along with that is a good way to promote that farther.
Well, I'm always a fan of the headroom too, and I'll be the first one to tell you, basically, cleaner power is louder generally until, maybe if you're trying to be dirty or something, but other than that, the cleaner the power is, the louder it usually is. So having headroom or having power on tap is, definitely a good thing. But also at the same time, when we say like, oh, the amp, we can only get 3,500 watts or whatever, that's likely true. I get 3,500 watts clean. I might be able to make it say it'll give me 5,000 or it'll give me 6,000, but it's not doing nothing because it's dirt. Uh, I don't know. That's kind of my take on that. But I've tested a lot of different amps. A lot. I guess some people know, some people don't. But I've done a lot of pretty loud scores on low power street setups, and I've tested a lot of amps. And if you got it working right, as long as the amp will make the clean rail voltage, you can do basically the same score with any amp. I mean, unless, like I said, unless there's something funky going on. But the important part is being able to get the clean voltage. Um, so once you get so small, then yeah, you ran out of clean voltage. So then yeah, the power is going to make a difference in the score. But as long as you can keep clean voltage, you can make the amp as small as you want and keep the score. I mean, depending on the power.
It's like Shannon said, what do you say when folks say you build a Burt box and they build a musical box? Do you think they are one and the same? I mean, you're building it for like a wider bandwidth. That's really all you're doing, right? When you're building, you say you want a musical box, or you're building this or that, or you're building it for your taste for music. So, I mean, I think you're still building the same sort of idea, but you'd be, when you build more of a Burt box, you're building for more of a narrow band of, So I guess I mean, you would build those, you would have a different approach to those, but I still would use the meter as, how I would gauge that. So say if I wanted to, it to be more musical or those kind of things, I think I would use the meter and say, I like it to, I like it to peak around 40. So then, listening to that peak, and you would build that to say what it'd be at 40. Then I would take 40 and then I would expand that. So I have bandwidth. I'd go to 35 and I'd go to 50 and see what gives me a better, bandwidth across all of those frequencies, and use the meter to figure that out for tuning for musical. That's how I would do it. Then, obviously with SPL, you're just testing out one note. But if you want to build something musical and you really wanted to maximize something musical, you can still use an SPL meter for that and just document it across, a bandwidth to give you something that's more musical, that will take, different music and play that differently.
I pretty much agree with that. I don't necessarily think they're the same, but I don't think they're as different as folks might think they are.
No, you just use the right tools, right? Like when you go to work and you have a particular job, you take the appropriate tools with you to go to work. And I still feel like people just say, well, I don't need the meter because of this reason or that reason or whatever else, but I still would, I still feel like an SPL meter is the same as like a voltmeter. It's just another tool that you could use to maximize and know exactly what you're doing. Like, I think it's just as important. It's just how you use that tool.
I mean, I guess it also depends on what you're calling musical too, but at the same time, I think the short answer is, they're definitely not the same. But I don't necessarily believe in such a thing as a Burt box either, because they can all be Burt boxes. You can burp any of them, and even if they are built for music, they'll still have a peak. So I don't disagree that they're different. I just disagree with what you call it, I guess.
Yeah.
But you know, um, so yeah, I think that's a good answer. Would we ever consider doing sound quality? Sure, I
Yeah,
think
I would.
we have in the past before.
I have, yeah, and I've done a little bit here and there, but I don't know. I'm so passionate about SPL. It's tough. I mean, I've tried it. I just don't. I don't know. I guess I would need. I guess I would need. I don't know. I would have to have somebody else that has a good passion for sound quality to kind of like um, change how I would test that or do those kind of things. I would need more. I would definitely have to have more like training and figure that out. If I went to sound quality training, but I'd still have to figure out how I'd have to get there, like how I would have to get to a point that I think that I could be, competitive, and that would be tough for me. I think I'd have to be, I'm almost 50, so my hearing isn't nearly as good as it used to be. Things like that, that might be a little tougher for me to do. It would be a challenge, but I would have to. I don't know. I'd have to get some more knowledge.
Are you required to use only a single amp or a strap pair of amps in lower power classes? Yes, that's already the rules.
Yeah, anything under 6,000 at this point, we have to do that.
So basically, Street 1, Street 2, Street 3, Modified 1, Modified 2, Modified 3, Modified Street 1, Modified Street 2, I guess your XST1, and your XM1 and XMS. All the classes that are 6,000 or under are limited to the 1 amp or a strapped pair. Yes. So hopefully that answers you, Mr. Bryce.
Yeah.
Shannon said, "So you're coming to the SQ training in Florida?"
No, not this time of year, man. None of my work. I'm lucky I have any PTO or anything like that they allow us to take. It's a little tough right now, especially the way things are. They done cut a whole bunch of people off. They let go like I don't know over 100 people across our company. So we're all picking up a whole bunch of extra work and working pretty hard to keep up with what they've taken away from us.
I think the only power limit change is going to be XM2, if I remember right.
That's all we talked about. Yeah,
we're going to go back to clamping that one, but other than that, I think it's pretty much where it's at.
I think we kind of settled on taking that back to 10K.
Yeah.
To match M4 rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, it matches M4 rules, so it goes back to that, to 10K. And then anything that's a M4 rule, it follows M4 format.
I think that was the clarifications there.
Yeah, for SPL, there really wasn't, as far as I think where we are with it, I don't think there's much else that's changed as far as SPL.
No, it was there was a couple wordings and things like that, but not a whole lot. I know that there's a couple things that we discussed that we'll probably bring into play next season, but it'll be something where hopefully I'll be able to make the changes immediately following finals next year. That's going to be my goal. So I think there's not a what am I looking for there? Not a whole lot that's going to be changing up this year. Yeah, XM1 will stay 4K.
No, Kevin, we have to keep that more. He asked about no visors in M1 through 3. No. I want to keep. I feel like that's what we have M4 and M5 for. I know that's a small line that we're kind of drawing there, but I like see the same thing. Me and Bud always had this fine line of things for us. Before Bud took it over, me and Bud were on the RE committee, and it was mostly us making rules. And then they had like some interjections from some other people that would come up and those kind of things, but it really wasn't. It was really me and Bud still steering that when Steve was still the owner. So we always had this idea that Mod Street needed to stay more street than modified class. And I feel like the same way is for modified. Like I feel like for mod 1 through 3, that needs to stay where it is and stay more pure as far as B pillar forward and those kind of things. I don't think that we want to be changing a bunch of stuff, adding, making a bunch of things that don't keep it stock. I think for M1 through 3, that needs to stay as stock as possible. And I like that M4 is more like a place where people fall where they can't make unlimited power and they don't have to go against people that have big power and those kind of things. I think that's what M5 is for, and we like to see those big setups. But it's also those guys that show up that have a wood roof because they daily bang their setup and they want a wood roof, and we give them a place to play. And 10,000 watts isn't terrible for that for M4. And I feel like they have there's a lot of people that fall into that. They just have a daily banger setup that fall into the M4, and they don't have to compete against that. But I believe that 1 through 3 needs to stay very stock in the front of that and have a wall, just something that's built higher than like what we have for obviously for Mod Street. And I still feel like Mod Street also went too far, and that was something that happened before Bud bought the company. And I feel like we can't go back now, but I still feel like Mod Street and what we've allowed in Mod Street is already too far. So I don't ever want to see that also move much further than what it is. That's just my opinion. And I think Bud shares that too. I think we both have that vision where we'd like to keep that, And we still have that same vision for 1 through 3 for mod class. That's our vision, is to keep that, where it is. And I know that's a fine line, and that's probably a long answer to something small about the visors, but that's just a small thing to me that I think that we need to keep pure, like those kind of classes like that.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much second that for the most part, and I'm also the guy that I believe that the less restrictions there are, the more fair it actually is. So that's and that's kind of the tightrope he's talking about, because if everybody can do it, everybody can do it, right? So I like allowing people to be creative and things like that. So sometimes I'll think some things are a good idea, sometimes I don't, but I'm definitely pretty much for the most part we pretty much think the same ways. And but I'm also one that I'll be the first one to I like letting people be creative. That's part of what makes the competition a competition. Philip says, does not having visors benefit you? Ask the term lab. Bring it to the term lazy.
It's hard to say. Some vehicles may, some vehicles not. It just depends.
I've seen it hurt. I've seen it help. I've seen it do nothing. That's the best answer I got. It's going to be vehicle dependent and setup dependent and meter location dependent. We can keep on coming up with variables all night, but yes, it can benefit you, and it also could hurt you. So that rule has been there for a long old time, David. Why can't Street put their visors down, Joe?
That actually started even when we were metering in the kick. And I have no idea why they didn't like that or whatever, but that's kind of where them old rules have just kind of always rolled through. And then it really just started becoming a focus when we started metering at the headrest. Then it kind of came back into focus, just like the glove box thing. Like that was a huge problem for whatever reason. Like, do you remember the debates? Do you remember those debates about the?
I also remember when we used to get the electric seats and stuff and push the meter all the way up against the dash, and
yeah, so they came up with the 20-inch rule.
I mean,
It'll drive your feet
I
locked.
guess maybe the 20-inch rule and stuff could change some of the thought process on that. But I mean, essentially, back, I guess when the rule was made, there really was the meter just had to go in the seat, and you could put the meter as close as you could get your seat.
Yeah.
So, if I could drop the sun visor down and get my seat to where the meter was right in front of the sun visor, then I understand why the rule is there, but it might not be as necessary or as much of a gain as it would have been now that we have the measurement. And, maybe even more so once we figure out the next step with that.
Well, now with how the meter, how it says that nothing can obstruct the meter from the windshield, like a straight shot to it. So I mean, if it was sitting that high, then if it flopped down in front of the, in front of the mic, then that might be a difference. That might be something that would be, against that rule. But it's one of those things where it's so if you allow the visor, then what if then somebody puts CDs up there or they do this or they do that? What I mean? Like there's always these things that just kind of opens up a can of worms for everything else. So if you just just don't allow it and it has to stay flat against the roof, then that's just it, period. And people can't try to do these things that that cause the next, like, how far can I take it?
So if that's the case, where's the rear view mirror rule? I think that's something they've always let people have missing. I've never seen one.
Yeah, just like Chad said, it's because you have those on your windshield. I know everybody's seen that where it falls off and it takes a chunk of the windshield with it.
Yeah. He says, can I just would it be legal to screw my visors to the roof? And I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be, because I'd say probably about 90 or 95% of your sun visors are screwed to the roof anyways, in some way, shape, or form. So, I mean, to me, if that's the only way you can make them hold up there, I don't necessarily think that that's a huge problem. I don't know. What does everybody else think?
I'm with you. Same things. You're just,
As long as it's there and it's held in place, I think that's really what.
It's no different than when you lose the screws out of it and you're putting different screws back in. You're kind of,
right.
You're bolting it back in. It's like somebody asked about hollowing out the back seat in street classes, the amount of amps, as long as the seat can fold back down in the factory position. Well, the back of the seat is the LPA.
Yeah. I was getting ready to say that basically the whole reason you can mount stuff to the back of the seats is because, I guess I put it all the way out there, like, Bobo's competitors and sound quality guys. There's a lot of guys that do fancy installs, and, I think really, shoot, I'm trying to remember what year it was. I can't remember what year it was, but anyways, it got done 10, 15 years ago. And that's when basically I started mounting my amps to the back of the seat, because they were allowed to hollow out the seats for install purposes. But yes, as long as it goes back into the factory position and it doesn't come through, change where the front of the seat is, I suppose. I don't know. Do you got a different answer for that?
No, I had a buddy, and it's gone back as far as 2005. He had a trunk car. Then we didn't have trunk classes, but he ran Street 5 for that. And he showed up to finals with his seat. Basically, he had done that. He had built that, built a box and then how to seat and then did that. And they, people were like, all mad about it. Like, what? You can't do this because now he has all this extra area from his trunk. Well, he did like a forward-facing box and everything, so that's how he wanted it. And the box was so big he didn't have room for his amps. He was running Street 5, so he needed as much air as he can. And then we didn't have 20,000 watt amps to fit, so he had a lot of amplifiers there. But he was able to fit his amplifiers. Like I think he used like the MMAX 3000s and stacked like 4 of them in there, and that's how he was able to get those amps to fit. But same thing. They said, well, we allow people to mount amps to the back of the seat, and when it closes up, that's part of your ICA. So we've always kind of, for 20 years, we've, all judged it that exact way, and that's kind of been the precedent for a long time. Has been, that's why you can tape the back of the seat, you can, deadener on the back of the seat and have exposed deadener. You can mount wood to it to mount the amp to it. You can do any of those kind of things, all because it's part of the ICA.
So Chad said behind the back seat is the ICA, not inside the seat, and that may or may not be true. But I'm just filling you in on the history of it and what you can actually do. I mean, maybe I should actually put the wording in there that lets them know they're allowed to do that, because I haven't seen it in probably the last 3 to 5 seasons, but it's not something that's out of the ordinary or something that I haven't seen, and has already been deemed legal in the past, long before I was even judging. So I think that's just some of those things are just, they kind of take precedent, and that's what we run with.
I would judge it that way. I would judge it as part of the ICA. Like you said, as long as it doesn't come through the front of the seat, I think you're good.
Right. I mean, that's always been the case. So that, I mean, I don't question that. Like I said, I've seen it several times. So.
Yeah. Like you said, sound quality guys, it seems to be like some of their street vehicles had that. We've seen that modified. We've seen that kind of thing.
All right. Do you guys have any other questions for us while we're on here? We're going a little over time this week, but I think it's been a pretty good conversation. Hopefully, some of you guys could take something out of it, and hopefully you might have learned something from it. But if you didn't, I'm sorry. But we can probably do this again sometime. But let's see.
What champion or award would Joe like to do?
How many years have each of you been judging? How many years you been a judge for, Joe?
Man, I think it was over 10 years, I think. Because I think I came back, I think Steve had me, I was helping at shows and doing those kind of things since 2005, but actually judging and being on the R&E committee and those kind of things, I think it was maybe 2009 or so, somewhere around there. It's been a long time.
I think let's see, I've been judging since 9, I think. So I guess 15 or 16 years, I guess.
Yeah, it's somewhere around there. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, I think I started judging at the very end of 08, beginning of 09, and then I think I got into R&E maybe 2010. Was it the year after or 2? I don't know, 10 or 11 I was in R&E, and then I think by 14 or 15 I was heading up to R&E. So I've been around a long time. Joe's been around a long time. I think I went to I don't know. I can't remember if I met Joe, but I definitely saw Joe at my first MECA show, which was a Carl Casper show, I think in 2001 or 2002, one of those. So, and I know it wasn't long after that I met him, because Shannon just went and got under his blanket and was like, "What y'all doing under here?"
And that's funny because we weren't really hiding anything. It was we were doing it for temperature reasons, because it was we had our vehicles all set up sort of the same, and but you seen right away, I'll show you whatever. I never cared about that. People always thought we were secretive. It really wasn't being secretive. It was trying to maintain a controlled environment. And that was always something that we always kind of, when it was our old team TNT, it was a controlled environment. That's all it was. Those were thermal blankets to keep the vehicle cool. Because we didn't have deadener. We didn't have as much deadener as we had now. We can only have 2 layers of crappy peel and seal deadener, like that kind of stuff. We didn't have the kind of things that you could control with now.
I know there's one coming up this weekend in Florida, Philip, and I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure Chad will have one coming, and I don't know if he is or oh, I don't know if we're gonna end up having one going on there or not.
I'm thinking about doing a left behind, little tots left behind after Christmas, so people can maybe donate their unwanted Christmas presents or something like that. For the Boys and Girls Haven.
Let's see.
If there's something that you're confused about, Phil, you can always message me or Bud. I'm sure either one of us will be happy to, clear up some confusion for you. If you just want some knowledge or whatever else, I don't mind. I'll help anybody. I've never blown anybody off. I've always helped anybody, even if they're in my class. I don't care. I get more enjoyment out of, helping somebody win a world championship than, winning it myself at this point, to be honest with you. I was prouder to see my wife and Mike win world championships than for mine, and Bud and Selena. That was, to me, when I, seen Selena, actually, fulfill her dream that we talked about when she was 14. That was something that was awesome for me. So, that's always kind of been more of my way of it. I'd rather teach at this point. I mean, I still love it for myself, but I get a lot more enjoyment out of, helping other people. It is a lot to take in, but little bits at a time.
Yeah, I think me and Joe both kind of feel the same way. Heck, he won a lot more than me, but I helped a lot more than him, maybe. But I don't know. But I feel the same way. I learned along the line. I kind of like showing people better than I actually like whooping on them, even though I did have fun whooping on people when I did. But I don't know, that's kind of part of the reason why it's hard for me to get motivated at this point to even, really work on the truck as far as sound pressure is concerned. Like I don't really necessarily feel like I have a lot to prove in that section of my life anymore. And, what's the point in whooping on people? I'd rather teach them. So, that's kind of, I'm not saying I'll never get it back out, but I'm just saying that's kind of, where I'm at with that. So
I do, something that this is going to sound, I don't know how to make this sound anything other than just what it is. It is what it is. There is a point though, to where, you're a man, and there's a point to where you've worked hard to, to be successful in this. And sometimes people do push your buttons, and you're like, you'd want to take it out and be like, hey, I still have it. Prove it to yourself and prove to them that you still have it, and you do those kind of things too. Nobody that had success can ever just say that and be humble 100% of the time when somebody questions them in some sort of way, either questions their integrity or questions, anything about them, as far as like whether they have any sort of, talent left, or if they're washed up or those kind of things. There is a point to where, you feel like as a man that you still have to stand up and say, look, I still got this, and I can still do this. And you don't have to poke this guy that hard to either one of us. It's the same thing with you, Bud. Nobody have to poke you too hard for you to take that Papa Smurf on a trailer to a trip to somewhere to prove that it's still there. And you can people can say you should be humble to these kind of things, but there's a point to where you stand up and you got to poke your chest back out and say, I've worked hard to accomplish some of the things that I have, and for somebody to undermine that and for somebody to put you down, that's I think it would be a disservice to you and your legacy to not stand up for yourself in those sort of ways. Maybe that, I don't know how else that's going to sound. It may sound arrogant. It may sound whatever it is, but hey, we're all men, and there's women here that have the same sort of things. But, there's a point where you push some of these buttons and you just have to stand up and stick up for yourself.
Oh, I didn't do nothing at Slam but come and have fun, Kevin.
Kevin, that stuff at Slam, that's a facade, my friend. That was that's the old SPL games that people don't understand, but that's the other part of this too. There's a lot more. There's a psychological warfare that goes along with this. That's
don't tell them too much.
No, all I know is that I remember this guy one time. He was running, and he said to this buddy, he says, "If I could 52.4, I bet that guy break out." And then that happened. It's those sort of things. There's a lot to this. It's the same thing that you see that in professional sports. You see those kind of things.
How can you run a single amp for the only way I know is you'd have to figure out wiring and be able to switch it back and forth. And I would use some sort of Anderson connectors or something maybe to help you make it quicker. But, other than that, you're going to definitely have to be able to change your wiring configuration from outside the enclosure. At least that'd be my best advice. You got something different for that, Joe? He's saying he didn't know about the single amp or strapped pair for clamp classes. How can I run one amp for a clamp class and use both for demos or an unclamp class if my amps aren't strappable?
Yeah, I think that's about the only way that you can is either, yeah, I mean, if you can make the correct amount of power for one class, yeah, it's a little tough. But yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be, just some terminals that you can easily switch out.
Yeah, do they still make those, Milani, the ohm switch or the ohmies or whatever they called them? Where
Yeah, but that works for multiple amps. That's just for one amp, like changing one load.
But I don't know if that would work or not in one way or another. Who's Bruce? Bruce has a question. Where did I miss it?
I think he meant Bryce. I think he was talking about the question that you answered.
Oh. Couldn't he just unplug the RCAs? Well, yeah, but then you wouldn't probably. I mean, I don't know how it's wired, but I would assume you would lose power to some of your speakers that way.
Well, that doesn't. Just so to bring that up, if it's just.
But if it's wired in, they're probably going to clamp it.
Yeah, and that's only for your sub amp. You don't have to worry about any other amps.
Right.
Just so you know, like that doesn't count for like highs amps and all that kind of stuff. It's new from last year, that rule.
Yeah, we just implemented it last season. No, the new rules aren't up, and you're probably looking. I mean, like I said, sound pressure is pretty much done. I'm working with the Dueling Demos book now. We're talking about sound quality. I'm hoping that we have them all up by the 1st of January, by the first week of January. But I'm also kind of at the mercy of waiting for the new developer to get started in Christmas break. So some of that stuff's kind of play it by ear, but no matter what, they'll be out by February the 1st. And I feel like currently we're on a good path to make January 1st. So, kind of depends on how these next two rule books play out during the discussions. But you're liable to see the sound pressure and dueling demo book any time now. Really, it's just all of them probably won't be complete until sometime in January. All right. I think I went for almost 2 hours once before. Um, any other questions? Yeah, I mean, I think I've gone 2 hours a couple times, really, but I can't hear Joe. Did you mute yourself?
Yeah, no, I was telling the boy good night.
Oh, you're good. No, I get that. I don't really think there's not really going to be a whole lot of build constraint changes. A lot of that stuff's pretty much the same. A few wording things. As far as the build constraints are concerned, dueling demos might change up a little bit, but as far as sound pressure is concerned, build constraints are pretty stable. I feel like at this point, not that they might not change here and there a little bit, but right now I feel like they're pretty stable. So I don't think you have to worry too much about that. I do think we might implement 12 inches across the board next year, and I'm also contemplating introducing some things with the one classes. So, but those will both be things that I want to be able to hopefully. I feel like I'm at a place with the sound pressure book that hopefully I can kind of just work on it through the year this year. And then at finals, I can kind of say, look, here's the changes because a couple of them are, I don't want to say they're drastic, but they're drastic enough that I'd want everybody to be doing it from the beginning instead of 3 or 4 months into it. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of what the future looks like too. All right. Any other questions you guys got? I think we've been on an hour and a half, Joe. It's probably your bedtime.
It went pretty fast, didn't it?
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun, I guess.
Yeah, it went pretty fast.
They don't know we could talk speakers all night and not even know it.
We didn't even get to the good part about talking about actual speakers and suspension and
well,
we didn't talk about any of that kind of stuff.
Like I said, we could probably do it again in a few months. I guess I'll keep the tradition alive since Shannon made that up. Who's the next victim, Joe?
Well, I think we talked about Ben earlier, right? You think Ben will want to come on there?
Did he win any awards? Or
She wants it to be somebody that won a club award or a world champion or something like that this year. I do love Mr. Hemp, and I will bring him on. But I guess she wants to keep to the script for now.
Yeah. I wonder if you could get Kurt or somebody like that to come on. Kurt, maybe you could ask him. Yeah, I think Kurt Eigensee would be fun to have on.
Oh, he'd be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
or even
somebody tell Kurt he's the next victim, courtesy of Joseph Ault.
See if we can get him to come on. Yeah. Or Cody. Or if not, if Kurt can't make it, or if Cody can't make it, then maybe we could get Kurt
or Cody. Kurt or Cody.
Yeah.
Don Ward.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, just keep the suggestions coming, and I'm going to reach out to him. I'll put everybody on here that wants to come on here.
I feel like Don Ward is a bit shy to be on here, but I mean, he may do it. I don't know, Kevin. He probably want to punch you in the arm for just bringing up his name.
You want Beastcraft? All right, we could get Beastcraft. Are you writing down all these names? I'll get the next person to choose the next victim, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Beastcraft would be great.
But he already said Kurt, so I've already messaged Kurt.
Oh.
Message has been sent out.
Kurt's already got a text.
Sweet.
Josh said bring on Whitney. I don't know if I can handle talking to her for an hour. Man.
Wow.
She knows I'm teasing. Joe didn't pick you yet, Whitney. Can you believe that? He was supposed to pick you, wasn't he?
No.
No.
She said no. She said no.
Oh,
Not
so
for
she said no already, and then gonna try to get mad when I make a joke out of it. Now they're chanting for you. All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up. You got any closing statements? Anything you wanted to say? Anything you wanted to ask me, Joe?
No, I think we're good.
She's the bestest. Yeah, she said you were number one too. All right, y'all. I think we're gonna call it. I'm gonna let Mr. Joe get off here. I appreciate you coming on and talking with us tonight. You know, like I said, I think a couple of us old schoolers here chopping it up. Hopefully, they might have learned something tonight. And we'll do it again here in a few months, 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months. I don't know. Maybe I should come to Ohio and we could just make a little YouTube series and I'll sit there and bullshit you.
Yeah, definitely. But, just like I said earlier about sleigh ball and everybody else, how we talked about helping. I don't mind helping anybody. So if anybody wants to message me or anything like that, I don't mind. I mean, a lot of people on here message me or we're part of a group together talking, so I don't mind giving out any advice for anybody. So I think that's what makes the sport a lot better.
I feel the same way, really. So appreciate you, Joe, and I'm gonna cut you off. You have a good one, and I'm sure I'll talk to you again soon about rules and stuff here. Probably for the end of the night, but have a good one, and I'll talk to you again here soon, Joe. Appreciate it. Later.
All right. Later.
All right, y'all. Well, got an hour and a half out of us tonight. My screen done about fell over, it looks like, but it'll be okay. But I appreciate everybody coming on here with us tonight. It was a good one. I had fun chopping it up with Joe. Hope you guys learned some stuff out of that. And we will be looking for our next victim next week. And I'll see you guys then. And I think until then, you guys know the drill. Keep it loud and clear, MECA heads.